Hi, thanks for joining me. This is Angie at Chicken Scratch, and this is the first video for the Bricks Quilt Quilt-Along. Okay, so I posted the supply list on my website. You're going to need 1 layer cake and then 2 charm packs. The charm packs need to be a solid color and they need to coordinate with your layer cake. So white is the dominant color in my layer cake, so I chose white. You're going to need a cutting mat, a ruler or a grid, and then your rotary cutter. Okay, so before I start cutting, I want to tell you this first video may scare a few of you off. Please don't let it scare you off. I promise that I can walk you through it. I don't have the right terminology for it, but I've made enough quilts that I can help you. And what I'm talking about is the grain of fabric. So fabric stretches if you sew it on the wrong side. So if you pull, you will notice that this piece right here is really stretchy. If you turn it, you're going to notice that it's not stretchy. And if I open up the packet, I don't want to mix them up because they're all going in the same direction. So again, I'm just going to pick up that first piece, and you can actually hear it popping. If you turn it in the other direction, it has a dull pop and it's really stretchy. So this is really important. Now I got to remember which way. Okay. You want to keep your charm packs going in the same direction. Okay. So I say keep the poppy side up this way. Okay. You're going to do the same thing with your layer cake. And the reason I'm covering this now is because you want to cut your layer cake on the poppy side. So I know somebody's laughing at me, but I'm telling you, this was the hardest part for me learning to quilt, was the whole bias thing. So see how stretchy that is? So what we want to do is actually cut on this side, okay? So this label, you know, don't even pay attention to where the label is placed because this is our poppy side. And if I just had one piece in my hand, you could hear that. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and open it up because in this first video, we are going to start cutting. And if any of you were confused by that explanation, just post it on our Bricks Quilt Quilt-Along, and I can help you. Okay, so I'm going to turn this back over and make sure I didn't get confused. See, this is the stretchy side. It doesn't pop near as well as the charm because it's a larger piece of fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my charm packs out of the way because we're not cutting those. So I'm just going to slide this over to the left. And I'm cutting one piece at a time. For people that have been cutting fabric forever, you are welcome to cut as many as you want. I still make mistakes. So cutting one at a time ensures that I don't. Okay, so again, you're only going to need 70 of these rectangles. But I'm going to cut all of them because I'm going to pick and choose which fabrics I want. If you don't want to do that, what you could do is go ahead and group your fabrics before you cut them. So you're only going to be using 70 5x10 rectangles. So I've got this on the 5 and I'm just going to cut. Okay, so I got a new piece of fabric. Maybe I'll include the reason why in my bloopers. Okay, so I'm positioning this at the 5-inch, and then now I'm cutting. And I want to make sure that I'm cutting straight. Whoops, I better put the safety on. Don't want to cut myself. I can tell I need a new blade, so I may have to pause this video and go get a new one. In fact, I will, so I'll be back, okay? Okay, so I've just cut my first layer cake at 5 inches. So now I have 2 stacks or 2 pieces that measure 5x10. So I'm just going to slide these forward, and then I'm going to grab my next section. Now I left in between that last one and this one, so that's why I wanted to make sure that I had the grain of fabric going in the right direction. So again, I'm lining this up at the 5 inches. So over here on the side at 5, and then I'm just making sure that the bottom of the fabric, I don't know if you can see that, so the bottom here is lined up on that line, and then the 5 is over here. And then I'm going to take my rotary cutter and cut. Okay, I'm going to do this to all of them. And I'm going to give you some advice. If you get to a pattern that is almost a solid color, which that's not this one. This one has some green in it. So I will more than likely use this one. But this next pattern that I'm fixing to grab, which is this one right here, I may not use that. So remember I told you that we were going to be using 70 rectangles? I'm going to go ahead and take this out. If I have to use it, I will, but I'm hoping that I don't have to. And I could be wrong. So then the next 3 are the same color. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to remove those and put them in a stack to only use if I don't have any other choice. Okay? So then now I'm going to take the next piece, and I just want to make sure that I did not put my fabric in the wrong direction when I left. Okay, so cut at 5. I'm going to do this to the rest of them, and then when I get back, I will show you the next step. Okay, so I've got all the rectangles cut, and then I place them in their color family. So this is primarily white, and then these are the pink ones. Then I've got the green, the yellow, the gray, and then the blue. Okay, so that's all 70 of those. I did remove 10, because remember we only need 70. Here are the ones I removed. I will tell you we may end up using these, so save them, set them aside, but don't get rid of them, because once we place these on our quilt wall, we may decide to add in a couple of these and remove some of these, okay? So in the next video, because video 1 is just basically cutting all your rectangles, in the next video we will add a charm square to the top of every single rectangle. So I'll cover that in the next one. So that wraps up this video. If you want to join our Chicken Scratch Quilt Along Facebook group, or you can find all the information about this quilt along over on angiejuda.com. Have a great day. Thanks a lot. Bye. Thanks for joining me. This is Angie at Chicken Scratch, and this is the second video for the Bricks Quilt Quilt Along. We've got all of our rectangles cut. Now this is not all 70. I went ahead and jumped ahead a little bit. I've got enough here just to show you. And then I've got my charm squares. So what I want to do first is make sure that I have my charm squares on the correct side. So you hear that pop. This is the stretchy side. So I want to make sure that I attach this side to the top of my rectangle. So I'm just going to place it right sides together, and then I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to move this stack out of the way and move that stack out of the way. And I'm just going to place it here on my sewing machine. Okay, so when I get here to the end, I'm going to back stitch a little, and then I'm going to raise my foot, pull this back, and then I'm going to pick up the next one. So I think this is called chain sewing. So once I get all of them sewn, then I will cut them apart, and I will show you the next step. So I'm just going to sew a couple more. I got to make sure I didn't turn my charms. When I get to talking, sometimes I do things on just without even noticing. So I want to make sure that I didn't move them. Okay, so I've done enough to show you this step. So I'll pause the camera and I'll be back with the next step. Okay, so I'm back, and here are all of my pieces that I sewed together. So what I'm going to do is snip these threads and then stack these up. I don't want to cut myself. Okay, final one. Okay, so now I'm going to actually switch my station out, because what we want to do now is press our seams. So I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so now we're ready to press our seams. So I've got my stack of fabric, and actually here's the entire stack of all 70. So now that you've got all of this stacked up, you're going to start with your first one, and you're just going to press that seam. And let me make sure my iron's hot. Yep, it is. And then what I'm going to do is just flip this over, give it a little steam, and now that's done. See? You could turn it over if you want to make sure that it's nice and flat, but I've been doing this enough. This iron is amazing. It's an eye-touch, and that sound you hear is that it's raising up off of the surface, so it doesn't, it won't burn your table. Okay, so again, press my seam, and then flip this piece over. I have to admit that I think I might give it a slight little tug when I'm pressing it, just to make sure that it didn't bunch up any. So I'm going to do a couple more. This part is actually a little therapeutic. I'm not sure why. Okay, so I think I've done enough so that you get how to do it. So I'm going to pause the camera again and then start back up with the next step, okay? Okay, I'm back with the next step. So I have pressed all 70 of my blocks, or rectangles I should say. And now, if you'll notice, my ruler is not large enough. So this one is, 6 by 12. So you will need a larger ruler for this step. So I will get that real quick. Okay, so I've got my really big grid, which is almost too big for this video, but it measures 6 by 24. So what I want to do now is I want to square up my rectangles. I normally say square up your block, so you could say square up your block. But the more I sew, the better I get and the less I have to cut. So I use a foot on my sewing machine that gives me a 1/4 inch seam. So that helps me to cut straighter, or to sew straighter. So what I'm doing is I'm lining up any line on your grid. Sorry, my lights are glaring. So you want to line up a line on the seam that you sewed, and you want to make sure that your rectangle is lined up properly based on that sewing line, on that seam. And you don't want to cut very much of your fabric, because if you do, then your seams are going to be really, really off. So if you look at this right seam here, that looks like it's lined up. But my left side, so now let's do it over here on this side, it looks like it's a hair off. To be honest, I'm not going to trim it, because to me that's straight enough. But let me look for one that is crooked. Okay, I can tell this one's got a hair of an overhang right here. Hopefully you can see that. So what I'm going to do is line this up. It's hard for me to see. And all I'm going to do is just cut a hair off there. And I want to make sure that this is straight. And it is. And you know what? Actually, I don't know. I'm actually not going to cut any off of that one either. I'm sorry. I'm filming this video and then I've got nothing to show you. Let's see. This one's a little crooked. Yeah, okay, here we go. Here's a perfect example. Again, I'm lining up my grid line with my seam. And if you look real close, there is a very small section right here that I did not sew straight. So I'm just going to remove that. And as you can see, that's about all I removed. So to be honest, this is a step that you can eliminate if you want to, but I have to make sure that I cover all the bases, you know, just in case. Okay, so this wraps up video 2. And the next video, what we're going to do is place these rectangles on our design wall. And don't forget to check out my Chicken Scratch Quilt Along Facebook group so that you can ask questions during this quilt along. It might be a few days before the next video is ready because I think video 1 and video 2 have given you enough homework. And the design wall, deciding the pattern, to be honest, will probably be the longest step in this process. For me it was, because I put all my rectangles up there and then I removed them and then I tried a different pattern. I really like knowing exactly how my quilt's going to look when I'm done. So my quilt wall or design wall is a very important step. Okay, have a great day. Thanks a lot. Bye. Hi, thanks for joining me. This is Angie at Chicken Scratch, and this is the 3rd video for the Bricks Quilt Along. Okay, so what you see here is my design wall, and I have placed my rectangles exactly where I want them. Now originally I had said that this quilt was going to be 14 rows across, and I eliminated the last row because I could not get another row of 5. So if you'll notice, the first row is all blue rectangles, the second row is green, followed by pink, yellow, gray, and then I repeated the pattern again, and the very last row is more of a white dominant strip. Okay, so before I get to the next part, I forgot to mention that I put all of my colors together in a row. You don't have to do that. So the reason that my video took longer than I wanted is I really tried to place these sporadically, and I could not. I just did not like the way that it looks. But it really depends on your fabric. So if you have a fabric that has a bunch of different colors and you can't get 5 in each row, don't worry about it. Part of this is that it's my own thing. I just can't get past it. Do make sure though that when you're lining up your rectangles, if you'll notice, the first row, the white charm square is at the top. The second row, the actual half of the layer cake starts. And then the third row is the charm square at the top again. So I'm going to zoom in and show you that real quick. Okay, so now you can get a clearer picture. You'll notice that the first row, like I said, it starts with the charm pack, and then the second row starts with the layer cake, half of the layer cake at the top. So you're just going to alternate those for every single row. And I will suggest that you take a picture of your quilt wall, or however you decide to do it, even if it's on the floor. Kids can run past or whatever, and or the wind could blow and these could all come falling down. So I have taken several pictures with my camera to make sure that if something falls, I still can remember how everything is placed. Okay, so what I've done is zoomed in. I hope the quality has stayed okay. I can't personally read those numbers from here, but I can pan over to show you row 1 and then 2. And so now what I'm going to do is take each row to the sewing machine and sew them together. So we're going to be sewing these in vertical rows for this quilt. So my first row is going to be all blues. I'll take that over to the sewing machine. When I get it done, I'll come get the second row of the green and sew those. If you guys have any questions, don't forget to post them on our Chicken Scratch Quilt Along Facebook group. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks. Hi, thanks for joining me. This is Angie at Chicken Scratch, and this is the 4th video for the Bricks Quilt Quilt-Along. What I've done now is I've taken the very first row and brought it over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew the rectangles together. So what I've done is I've made sure that my pin is in the top, because this is the first row, and the first row starts with the charm square. My second row is actually going to start in the reverse with the layer cake at the top, and I will have row 2 pinned on the top of the layer cake, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So I've got the entire first row here, and what I'm going to do is just sew these together. So what I'm going to do is just place these right sides together, and then I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. Now, I had someone give me some advice on my sewing machine about not back stitching. Well, most of the people that I am teaching do not have the same sewing machine that I use. So although I appreciate their suggestion, I'm still going to back stitch because most people's sewing machines are different than mine, and I want it to, you know, appeal to everyone and not just people that own the same type of sewing machine that I have. So I am back stitching. Okay, lift my foot. I've kept my pin in the first one so that I don't make a mistake of how I'm attaching the rest of them, okay? So keep your pins in place. And now I'm going to pick up the third. And hopefully I'm staying in the camera view for all of this. Since I'm filming all these videos just in my house and my basement, it's just me and the tripod and my sewing machine, so I think it's working out okay. I got a thread here that needs to be snipped. Okay. Whoops. Now what I'll do is I'll pause the camera because you don't need to watch me sew all of these. When I get to the second row, I'll resume filming. Okay, so before I go and get the second row, I just wanted to go ahead and show you row 1. So I've sewn all of these together, and I will pause the camera and I will be back with row 2. Okay, so now I have row 2 in my hands, and I've pinned the number 2 up here at the top on the layer cake. And so now I'm just going to lay the rest of the stack in my lap, and I'm going to pick up the top of the second piece and place it against the charm square, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. So you're going to repeat this on all of your rows. Like I said in video 3, mine is actually going to be 13 rows now instead of 14. So the next video will cover that we're just going to actually attach all of our rows together. So we are almost done. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget, if you have any questions, to post them on our Chicken Scratch Quilt Along Facebook group. Hi, thanks for joining me. This is Angie at Chicken Scratch, and this is the 5th and final video for the Bricks Quilt Along. Okay, so I have sewn all of my rows together. Let me separate row 2 from row 1 real quick. Okay, so this is my entire first row. You can see all of my blue rectangles. So now that I've got all of my rows sewed, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to attach row 2 to row 1, and then I'm going to sew down the right hand side, 1/4 inch seam, and when I'm done it's going to open up, you know, just like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to still continue to keep my pins in with the numbers because I just don't want to lose place in case the phone rings or I have to leave or whatever. So I like to start in the middle of my row and pin it. Now I will tell you, when you're working with pre-cuts, sometimes your seams are not going to be straight, and some of them will and some of them won't. I think all of the quilts that I have made have turned out beautiful. So I'm not too worried about it. So I'm going to start here in the middle. And you don't want to pull it. You just want to let it lie the way it wants to, okay? And I'm just going to line that seam up and then get my pen and pin it. And then I'm going to work to the right. So I'm just going to try to keep it straight, but I'm not going to pull on anything. I'm just going to pin it every so often. And I'm not going to actually show you the sewing of these rows because by now you guys already know I'm just going to sew down the right hand side, 1/4 inch seam. There's nothing special or fancy about it. What I will do is after I get the entire quilt sewn, I will show you how to determine your backing fabric and all that stuff. In this video, I'm just basically showing you that I'm pinning row 2 to row 1, and then I'll sew. Now let me give you a piece of advice. For a quilt that's this large, because this is a little bit bigger than what I normally make, I would sew rows 1, 2, and 3, probably 1 through 6 together, and then I would sew rows 6 through 9 together, and then 10 through 13 or 14, however many you're going to have. And then I would sew those 3 panels together. That will just make it a whole lot easier to work with. Okay? So I'm going to keep filming until I get to the very end of this first and second row. And then I will pause the video until I can get this entire quilt sewn. And I'm happy to say that here at the end you can see that it pretty much lines up, so yay for me. Okay, I'll be back in just a little bit. Okay guys, so I am back with my quilt and I have sewed all 13 rows together. If you followed the original pattern, you would have 14 rows. I eliminated one because I wanted to keep all of my rows by color family. Anyway, so the next step is you're going to measure it to determine your backing fabric and your binding fabric. I've got my little piece of paper here. So what we're going to do is take our tape measure and measure this quilt, the width and the length. So I've got my tape measure here. I want to make sure I start at the proper end. And the way that I know which one is the width is, of course, my rectangles are going vertically, okay? So I'm going to start over here on the left side and make sure the one is exactly over to the left. This is a lot of fabric in the camera. Maybe I'll just remove the whole thing. There we go. Okay, so going from left to right. You know, if I could get a camera positioned elsewhere so that I could show you more of a surface, I would, but I just cannot film upstairs anymore. There's just too much noise between the street noise, the neighbors, the animals. Okay, so this measures 59. Let me write that down, and I am going to check my measurement real quick just to make sure, since I was talking, that it's accurate. So again, start from the left, go to the right. Yep, about 59. Okay, now we want to check our length. Now, I gave you earlier measurements before we started this quilt along, and again, I'll remind you that mine is a different measurement because I eliminated one row because I couldn't get 5 rectangles of the same color. So I'm okay with mine being a little smaller. It's not by much, just by 1 row. Almost to the end. Okay, so it is almost 72. I don't think you can see it. So I'm going to write down 72. Okay, so our quilt measures 59 by 72 if you have 13 rows. Yours is going to measure something different. I'm going to assume that all of you are going by the original 14 rows. Okay, so now I'm going to get out my iPhone and I'm going to hope that I don't have any glares. I've showed this before, so in all of my quilt-alongs, I've showed you this app. I use it for every single quilt I make, and as you can see, I've already got it open. So it's the Robert Kaufman Quilter's Calculator. I don't even think I can get to the front of it anymore. Anyway, when you open it up, you tell it to skip the ad, and then you're going to click on backing and batting. The width of fabric is 43 inches. There is larger fabric, but I never purchased that. And it's not available in very many colors. Anyway, so the width of our quilt is 59. The length is 72. I'm going to go 2 inches for overage and calculate. That tells me that I need 4 1/4 for backing. Now, if you made a larger quilt, you're going to need either that 4 1/2 or 5 yards that I told you initially to have. Now we're going to hit the back button and we're going to go to the binding. We're going to enter those same measurements. My binding strips are 2 inches. My long arm quilter does that, so check with your long arm quilter to find out how much overage. I know if you get them done, if you send them off like online, sometimes they actually want more, okay? So just check your binding strip width. So the width of my quilt again is 59. The length is 72. My quilter does bias binding, so I'm going to click on bias and then hit calculate. And to be honest, I have to hit calculate a couple times. So now it says that I need a 1/2 yard for my binding fabric. So I'll take my backing fabric, my binding fabric, and my quilt top to my long arm quilter. Now I'm going to get the quilt back out really quick. I'm going to tell you really quick to check your seams before you take it to your long arm quilter. You want to make sure there's no holes. You really want to patch those up before they get to the long arm quilter. And a lot of times I will check for them when I iron it. So you do want to press and use starch on your quilt before you take it to the long arm quilter. You also want to trim these extra threads. So I'll look for those and then fold it real nicely and take it to my long arm quilter. Okay, so this wraps up the Bricks Quilt Quilt Along. Please be sure to share your pictures of your quilt on our Chicken Scratch Quilt Along Facebook group. We have another quilt along that's going to be starting immediately following this one. And I'll post all the details on my Angie Juda site. Have a great day. Thanks a lot. Oh, wait, before I leave, I will post pictures of this quilt once I get it back from the long arm quilter, so it's going to take about a month, I anticipate, and I'll show the pictures on my website and on our Facebook group. Okay, see you later. Bye.